Hello and welcome to iNurture videos. In this video, we will discuss the basics of binding in programming languages. At the end of this video, you will be able to explain the basics of binding in programming languages, explain types of binding in object-oriented programming languages, OOP. Binding is an application programming interface which provides the glue code to use the libraries and services in different programming languages. In software libraries, bindings are wrapper libraries that bridge two programming languages, so that a library written for one language can be used in another language. Binding in a program is an association of an attribute with a program component. It basically fixes a certain value or property of the object. Binding time refers to the time during which binding takes place. There are two types of binding: static binding, it is also known as early binding; dynamic binding, it is also known as late binding. First, let's learn about static binding. When type of the object is determined at compiled time by the compiler, it is known as static binding. It occurs while translation, language definition, and implementation process. Static binding is achieved using function overloading and operator overloading. Even though there are two or more functions with same name, compiler uniquely identifies each function depending on the parameters passed to those functions. Let's discuss an example of static binding. As we can see in the code, the class first represents the base class and class second the derived class. Both of these contain an integer data member and a member function. The content related to data member is displayed using the function display open bracket close bracket. Note that in main open bracket close bracket function, the S is an object belonging to the derived class second. Therefore, to invoke the function display open bracket close bracket of base class, we have used the scope access operator. Next, we will discuss about dynamic binding. Dynamic binding, also called dynamic dispatch, is the process of linking procedure call to a specific sequence of code method at runtime. It means that the code to be executed for a specific procedure call is not known until runtime. Dynamic binding is generally used when multiple classes contain different implementations of the same method. It provides a mechanism for selecting the function to be executed from various function alternatives at the runtime. In C++, virtual functions are used to implement dynamic binding. Let's view an example of dynamic binding. As we can see in the code, the function point pt is used for calling functions. The compiler will not be able to employ static binding. Compiler will read addresses that are held in pointers. Decisions will not be taken as which function has to be executed first until the runtime, hence resulting in late binding. The different binding time attributes are language definition. Binding may occur at the time of language design. For instance, binding the name true to the Boolean value. Language implementation. Binding may also occur when interpreter or compiler is being written. Program translation, also known as compile time. Binding may occur when program gets translated to machine language. Load time. Binding may occur when machine language is loaded onto the memory to carry out execution. The global variable location is bound at this load time. Function or procedure invocation time. This specifies the time when program is executing. During this time, the actual parameters get bound to the formal parameters. Program execution, also known as runtime. Binding may occur anytime during program execution process. Let's have a quick recap on what we discussed. Binding is an application programming interface which provides the glue code to use the libraries and services of different programming languages. Static and dynamic are the two types of binding. Static binding occurs at the time of translation, language definition, and implementation. Dynamic binding occurs at the time of execution. Thank you for watching this video.